Tito Karnavian, PhD, the Distinguished Minister for Culture, Community and Youth, and Second Minister for Law Singapore, Mr. Edwin Tong, the Honorable, my humble colleague Mori Ong as the President of ALSA National Chapter Singapore, the Honorable Moderator, Ms. Shana Priyanka Ramadanti, and all participants in the Zoom meeting and live YouTube of ALSA Indonesia. I am here today humbled, honored, and grateful for the countless blessings, knowledge, and opportunities that have been granted by the one and only God. First and foremost, I thank the Minister of Home Affairs of Republic of Indonesia, Minister for Culture, Community, and Youth, and Second Minister for Law Singapore, ALSA National Chapter Singapore, Moderator, and my beloved National Board for the time, generosity, and persistence to make this legal discussion happen. We're all aware on how COVID-19 pandemic has resulted to a massive change in our daily life. The adverse impact that goes beyond our initial prediction has resulted to a significant loss in every dimension. Economics, which people are not only harmed by the virus, but by their job losses. Politics, legal system, and indeed health and safety. As of now, in Indonesia, it has been confirmed that we have 1.31 million cases, 1.1 million recovered, and 35,000 deaths. Our government has taken some measures to handle this pandemic, starting from social distancing policies, restriction on international flights, COVID-19 task force, and to imposing partial lockdowns. However, this may be deemed ineffective, as it is found that Indonesia is recorded as the country with the most COVID-19 cases compared to other Southeast Asia countries. Thus, COVID-19 is still daunting. On the other hand, in comparison to the Singapore government in handling this pandemic, they have shown a considerable impact. Singapore ranks the 10th safest country from COVID-19 in the world based on the Deep Knowledge Group report. The key measures that have been taken and perhaps can be learned by us are the effective government-led and multi-agency responses. Second, multi-layered trust, which they have managed to maintain reasonable levels of trust in political leaders, so the political leaders are able to convey and plant trust to the public accordingly. And third, transparent, clear, and consistent communication. So it is clear that Singapore government is prepared with layers of contingency plans. It also imposes a strict and direct sanction to the protocols violators. For example, penalties and also revoking permanent resident status. Participation also played a significant role in responding to this pandemic. Needless to say, there's an amount of lessons from Singapore that can be tailored to improve COVID-19 responses in Indonesia. Hence, today's discussion, we're going to have a comparison as to broaden our horizon and to do what should be done by every stakeholder. I hope all participants can gather more information, knowledge, and experience from
So without further ado, so now let me introduce our moderator for today. Okay, let me introduce our moderator for today. She is an Indonesian, but now living in Thailand, working as a program officer at Regional Human Rights Organization in Asia Forum, Thailand. Her work experience includes research assistant at Center for International Law Studies, Faculty of Law, Universitas Indonesia. She was an intern at Baker McKenzie, or as called as Hadi Putranto, Hadinoto and Partners Law Firm in Indonesia. She was a fellow at Asian NGOs Network on National Human Rights Institution. Besides, she also has published several articles. So let's welcome Ms. Shana Priyanka Ramadanti as the moderator for today's legal discussion. Ms. Shana, you might have the time.
Thank you, Anissa, and thank you so much for inviting me to be the moderator for today's discussion. It's really great to be back in ALSA. First and foremost, I would like to welcome once again to our honorable speaker that we have right here now is Bapak Professor Haji Muhammad Tito Karnavian, PhD, as the Minister of Home Affairs of the Republic of Indonesia. Welcome, Pak. And warm welcome to distinguished participants from ALSA Indonesia and also ALSA Singapore, as well as online viewers out there. Welcome to the 6th ALSA Indonesia's legal discussion. Today it will be very interesting because we'll be discussing an important issue and very pertinent as well, which is in relation to the COVID-19 pandemic. The continued prevalence of the COVID-19 public health emergency has been unprecedented occurrence in recent history and has presented its own set of challenges. Not only has it affected millions of people in terms of health, but it has also brought to the fore the glaring inequalities that exist in societies, namely in political, social, economic, cultural, and civic levels. For example, as stated in the rapid risk assessment that was made by ASEAN, the pandemic actually has threatened to increase inequalities and undo the region's poverty reduction progress over 2 to 3 past decades. In today's legal discussion, we'll be taking a look at the context of the Asian region, namely 2 countries, which are Indonesia and Singapore. And we will be seeing on how the government is trying to overcome these challenges and further handle the impact of COVID-19 in their respective countries. We'll look at opportunities, challenges that these 2 governments has faced, and perhaps we'll see the comparison and seeing best practices that are implemented by these 2 countries as well. As you also know, these 2 countries have also started its vaccine rollout program, and we'll further unpack the implementation of these programs and see how it will enhance or not the situation of their respective countries and also contributes to the situation of the region. Now, we're very fortunate to have 2 highly important figures as representatives from the government of Indonesia and Singapore who have given some time amid their busy schedule to share their insights in their countries. Firstly, we're joined by the Honorable Bapak Professor Haji Muhammad Tito Karnavian, PhD, as the Minister of Home Affairs of the Republic of Indonesia. Bapak Tito was appointed as the minister in 2019, and prior to that, he has extensive experience in the National Police Force and was the Chief of the Indonesian National Police in 2016. Moreover, with many of his awards and publications that he has made, Bapak Tito Karnavian has also obtained a Distinguished Service Order or Dariah Utama Bakti Cemerlang from the Singapore government. Second, we will be joined by the Honorable Mr. Edwin Tong, who was appointed in July 2020 as the Minister for Culture, Community, and Youth, and Second Minister for Law for the Republic of Singapore. Prior to this, he served as the Senior Minister of State at the Ministry of Law and Ministry of Health. At the ministry, Mr. Tong focuses on the development and promotion of Singapore's legal and dispute resolution sector, as well as wide-ranging aspects of law reform, including intellectual property, corporate restructuring and solvency, and legal aid. In his times at the Ministry of Health, he was instrumental in implementing measures to enhance public health, including upholding the standards of practice and public confidence in the medical profession. All right, before we begin the discussion, I wish to remind participants here that there will be a Q&A session after the presentation that is made by each speaker. If you have any questions, please feel free to type it down in the box, in the chat box, or in the comments if you're watching from YouTube. And I will explain again the guidelines for the Q&A in the upcoming session. Without wasting any more time, let us start the discussion. And I would like to ask Bapak Profesor Haji Muhammad Tito Karnavian, PhD, to start his presentation. Bapak Tito, the floor is yours.
Well, thanks very much indeed, Miss Shana Priyanka Ramadan. Miss or Mrs.?
Miss, Pak.
I beg your pardon. Yeah, I suppose Miss. Yeah. First of all, I would like to thank for the ASEAN Law Student Association of ALSA, more specifically President of ALSAians Indonesia, Khalifa Al-Qais Yusuf. Yeah, thanks very much indeed for your introduction. I believe that you might be in the middle of your home farm because the signal is not very good over there. Excellency Minister for Culture, Community and Youth, and Second Minister for Law, Mr. Edwin Tong of Singapore. Warm greeting for you as well. And I would like to extend, even though it's a little bit late, a happy Chinese New Year for you. And I wish you and your family will be more healthy and more wealthy. I would like also to say hi to President of ALSA Singapore, Mrs. Mori Ong. Ladies and gentlemen, I think the theme of our discussion today is quite interesting. Number one, it is pandemic. COVID-19 is still lingering issue and still becoming very, very hot potato. Yeah. Not only nationally, but also globally. Not being solved yet. And secondly, it's quite interesting for me because it is actually multi-dimension crisis, but more focusing on health problem and economic problem. Two main problems, the impact of the pandemic. But this issue relating to the health and economic problem being discussed by law people. That's why it is quite interesting for me. Even though it is some relationship between law and health and also economy and other matters as the impact of the pandemic COVID-19. So I would like to share with you how the government of Indonesia dealing with the COVID-19 pandemic. I would like to break up my presentation into 5 parts. Number one is that what actually our initial response is since the onset of the pandemic in Indonesia. And number 2, we found and experienced that in fact, pandemic COVID-19 is not a single dimension crisis, but again, multi-dimension crisis. Mr. Khalifa already pointed out about this sort of issue, multi-dimension. And number 3, I like to update the trend of pandemic COVID-19 in Indonesia today. What are the impediments? What are the problems for us to solve the problems? And what are we going to do in the future, the way forward? Let me start with the response. So, you know that the globe was shocked by the outbreak in Wuhan in late December 2019. Well, to be honestly, we have got some experience of outbreak before, such as SARS, avian flu, MERS, and so on. They are not reaching Indonesia. So we were also thinking at the time that this outbreak in Wuhan would be the same thing. It's not going to reach Indonesia. So initially we are a little bit relaxed But then it spread outside Singapore to South Korea. So it's the Chinese to South Korea, then going to Japan and other part of the globe very, very quickly. So in March, early March, 2nd of March, particularly, then it already hit Indonesia in Jakarta. 2 females being infected. Then we announced publicly that COVID-19 already reached Indonesia. Then other countries also suffering. They are also infected, contaminated. Even going beyond ASEAN continent to Europe, United States, Latin America, thousand miles away from Wuhan, the epicenter. So we realized then that pandemic COVID-19 is not only an outbreak, local outbreak, but it is indeed a pandemic. Then we realize today as well that it is the biggest or the largest in terms of territory, the largest pandemic since the presence of human being. In terms of casualty, indeed, 2 biggest pandemic before, such as Black Death in Europe and Central Asia, where it killed more than 70 million people in 14th century. Then we have got also Spanish flu, 1917, 1920, killing around 50 million people. Then with casualty around 50 million. But in terms of the width of territory being infected, I believe that the COVID-19 is the biggest one or the largest one. Why? Because we recognize more than 200 countries or territories, whether it is recognized by United Nations or not. But at least 216 countries already affected. That means that this COVID-19 already affected all over the world, all over continents. That's why, in my personal perception, this is the largest pandemic experienced by human being. So it is a new one for us. This is something really new for all leaders, state leaders, or local government leaders. The spread is very fast, and you see that in Indonesia, after realizing that it is the fast speed of the pandemic, of the spread, then the government already created a task force, specific task force on the 13th of March. At national level, led by the Director of National Disaster, or BNPB, then at the governor level or provincial level, led by a governor, mayor level, cities and towns led by mayors, and kabupaten or regency led by the task force led by bupati or head of regencies. You know that in Indonesia we have got 548 provinces, 34, then 98 cities and towns, and the remaining around 400 something regencies. But you know that, let's not forget that our regency is in terms of population, it really varies from tens of thousands to 5 million, like in Bogor, for instance, only one regency, 5 million people. So this task force is being tasked, to deal, to recognize, to investigate, and to learn how to cope with this problem, the nature of the problem, the COVID. And the government already state of emergency based on the decree of president since 31st of March 2020. So we are in a state of emergency due to non-natural disaster. Indonesia is prone to disaster, particularly natural disaster, because of location is in a ring of fire, volcanoes, tsunami, earthquake, flood. But we have got also non-natural disasters such as health-related issue. So we implement restriction if China already implemented lockdown, total lockdown, where people is not, allowing to go out of their houses in specific time, incubation time. Other countries also applying, such as India, the biggest lockdown. But in the case of Indonesia, we are applying what we call is large-scale social activities restriction to restrict specific activities such as working from home, studying from home, using the internet, then also restrict the religious activities, then some other restriction for in the public facilities or public gatherings. But then this measure, in fact, was not sufficient. Why? Even though officially we recognize that Jakarta was the first one being hit, but Indonesia is a very large country. We have got many international airports in Bali, North Sulawesi, South Sulawesi, Medan, Bakanbaru, many international airports, many seaports as well. And that we have got porous borders with our neighboring countries such as Malaysia, East Timor, and Papua New Guinea. So with Malaysia, such as in Borneo, Kalimantan Island, well, even though we recognize around 7 official, border posts, but in fact we have also some other illegal entry into Indonesia or exit to Malaysia, thousands of them, along more than 1,000 kilometers in the jungle. So it's not easy, again, to contain and to lock Indonesia. Then as a result, 34 provinces, all provinces in Indonesia being affected. 98 cities also being affected and spread to other regencies, 416. So even though the number of positive rates mostly in Java and Bali, I will tell you later about that. We realize again that it's not only a health problem or virus problem. From health, it is a multidimensional problem that create like a domino effect. From health problem, then hitting the other domino, economy. Then once, because of the restrictions, people also very worried. Since the onset, initial phase of the pandemic, particularly in March, April, and June, people are scared because of the news, in Spain, for instance, killing many people, in Italy also as well, in the UK and France, number of casualty, but death really high. So again, because of this fear, people also reluctant to go out. So two things affecting economy. Number one, the fear to go out being infected. We don't know yet what is the impact of this virus. We are still learning what actually the nature of this virus, what level of danger of virus, and so on. Number two, measures being taken by government to restrict mobility, interactions, and large-scale public gatherings in public area, religious activities, social activities, even sport activities also being restricted. So it affects and it change the patterns of supply and demand. People more demanding on specific items such as food, number one, health related items, number three, also, giving the opportunity because people want to contact one another, not physically, they're using the internet. So IT also another opportunity actually, and being used. And IT items also, being bought by people from the market. But secondary necessities such as cars, then tourism or properties, the demand is going down. So since the demand already changed, then also affected the supply, production around the world also, being shrunk. Indonesia as well. Indonesia, we are one of the producing countries for many items, also being badly affected. Economy being hit, finance also being hit. You know that in Indonesia we have got revenue, our revenue also being affected. Right? Lucky that Indonesia is a country with a variety of revenue, unlike say like countries in Middle East relying upon one or two products such as oil in Qatar, for instance. Right? So when the oil demand being hit, being shrunk, and production also, supply also being hit, the revenue also being hit. But Indonesia, a bit lucky because, well, we have got revenue from gas and oil. We do have mining industries such as coal, nickels. Then we have got also farming industries such as palm oil, rubber. We have got also food productions, then such as corns, coconuts. Then we have 65% of our territory is water, so we have got also revenue from the fish or other ocean products. So if you see the slide before, right? China still survived above 0%, 2.3%. Vietnam, 2.9% still plus. But other countries, mostly minus, such as United States, minus 3.50. South Korea, -1. Indonesia, -2. Hong Kong, -6. European Union -6. Some other countries even plunged to -30. And I believe Singapore around 6 or 7%. Yeah, in terms of economic growth. So if you see that the chart on the right, Indonesia, being hit, but at moderate level. It's not really badly hit. Again, this is because of number one is variety of revenues, a variety of products, and also we have got a domestic market quite big, 270 million people. So such as our aviation industry, it is hit, but some still survive because people still need transportation, air transportation that connect or transport them from place to place, from island to islands. If you see that economic and finance, the next slide here. So in the year 2019, we are maintaining above 5% economic growth. But then in the quarter one, 2020, quarter ones mean January, February, and March, going down to 0.97%, still positive. But then in quarter two, dropped dramatically, minus 5.32. Then we are start to recover in quarter three, going up to minus 3.49. And in the last quarter, 2020, so we are also going up to minus 2.19. So based on this number, Indonesia actually in the trend of recovery, and the impact of crisis in terms of finance fall into category of moderate. It's not really severe like many other countries. We have also another domino, social problem. Social problem because production's going down. Manufacturers also reduce their products. The demand also, being reduced. As a result, we have got a number of people being unemployed or they are being housed. Then the number of people fall into category of unfortunate, less fortunate, poor people also being augmented. But Indonesia is still lucky because the country still manage. All leaders in the world, they are all in dilemmatic positions. Which one must be prioritized? Whether it is health problem to contain the spread of COVID-19 or to save the economy. So we believe that we have to save both. It is just like two sides of the coin. We cannot just leave one and focusing only one another, because if we focus only on health, economy will be hit badly. Then we don't have any capability to improve our capacity, health capacity. And number two, if we are not able to survive our economy, then the number of people being unemployed, lost jobs, and so on, will be out of control. So, Pak Jokowi, our president, have a specific principle for dealing with the pandemic COVID because of the health issue and economic issue. So he said we need to make a balance between brake and accelerator. Brake means health restriction. We restrict mobility, large gatherings, and also and other things that enable the spread of the virus, health issue. But if the number is in control, then we have to give way for economic people, to work to recover the economy. Because again, we need money. So based on this principle, while some other countries, another domino already fallen into security problems, such as criminals, crime increase. Then you have got demonstration and even riots in many countries, even United States. We are on the stage that we are able to manage the social issues, social problem, that then the domino of security is not falling. Security is still stable in Indonesia. Why it is very important, to secure our country and stability is that, because it can hit another domino, politics, lack of trust to the government. You see that one of the issue, in some observers said of, the defeat of Trump is that because of the management of the COVID-19. And yesterday or 2 days ago, I read in newspapers as well that the Prime Minister of Thailand, was impeached because of on the ground of the mismanagement of COVID-19, even though he survived. So political issues, it's really multi-dimensional problems then being experienced by us. So we are actually the actor of history today. So given the fact that money or finance is really critical to handle both the health issue, social problem issue, then also to survive our economy, whether in national level or local level. So the government already make a policy in the central government to reallocate the budget, for infrastructure and for other things that we think they're not really urgent, being reallocated to three things. Number one is that, again, health problem, providing masks, improving the health infrastructure, such as the hospitals, medical officer, then also the medicines and some other things, ventilators, PCR tests. And the second one is that social safety net. We identify those being affected, whether they are unemployed, lost their job, or they're being housed, they need to be subsidized. So we provide subsidy to these people to make them calm down, to make them also safe. It's big money. Well, I'm not going to say the money, that you can see the presentation, and we can share the presentation later on with you in details, given the fact I've got only 30 minutes. And the third one is that the money, to make our economy survive. So we give incentives to big players Then for middle and low or small players, providing credit or some cash even to ultra micro business people. So it is applied not only by central government but also local government. Then we produce specific decree. I made a joint decree with the Minister of Finance.
Excuse me, Pat, I'm so sorry. We have remaining 5 minutes for the presentation.
Give me another 10 minutes. I will try to make it very quick, more quickly.
Thank you, Pat.
Yeah, a joint decree between Minister of Home Affairs and Minister of Finance to allow local government 548 local government to reallocate their budget. So basically, based on this kind of measures, right, whether it is restrictions, providing money, legal platform, and so on. So our economy remaining survive. So, but the trend of pandemic COVID in Indonesia today we are actually still going up. Yeah, even though it's not really exponential. Please, slide 23. Yeah, it's not actually exponential. You know that if we want to see what happened in COVID-19 in one country, number one is positive rate. Number two is recovery rate. Number three is how many people dead, fatality rate. If you see that comparison between Indonesia and the world, for instance, the number of positive rate today increasing to more than almost reaching 130,000. Then, but recovery rate 85.3%. So it is a little bit lower than the world, 97%. But in terms of fatality rate, we are only, well, not they are human being, right? But in terms of number, 2.7%, while whereas in the world, in global, 3%. But if we compare, you know, Indonesia is a big country. Yeah. We need to compare it all to other big countries as well, apple to apple. If you see the United States, for instance, the total deaths until today, above 500,000, 520,000. Indonesia remaining 35,000. Well, I'm not going to tell you how, why, because I don't have time to do so. India, 156 million people dead, right? And Brazil, the population is smaller in Indonesia, 251,000 dead. Russia, 85,000 dead. UK, the number is 60 or 70 million people over there. Yeah, vis-a-vis Indonesia, 270 million people, 122,000. So the fatality rate in other countries, big countries, higher than Indonesia. So we rank 18 in terms of positive rates. Well, bed occupation ratio, BOR, still remaining safe, yeah, because the maximum around 45% something. So we have got some availability in terms of bed for positive for the patients. So what are the impediments? Number one, it is again first time for us as a young people, to experience this one. Even since independent of Indonesia, we don't have this kind of big such magnitude of health problem. Demography is a problem for us. Why? Again, Indonesia is the country with the population number 4 in the world, and the proportion of high class, middle class, and low class. We have got a majority low and middle, right, where the financial capability of household, is limited. Number 2 is geography. Please bear in mind that Indonesia archipelago with more than 17,000, 3 time zones. We have got cities, 98. People live also in, not only in cities, village, mountain, valleys, river, rivers, remote islands, forests. Geography, another issue for distribution particularly. Majority people live in Java. Usually in small island, 150 million people without natural boundary. You see that we've got 6 provinces over there, 68.7% of positive rate happening in Java and Bali. So it is impossible for us to lock down. An island country can lock down. But in this Java island, 150 million people with no natural border, is quite impossible to lock down. So we have to do something. Compliance of people is really critical. Wearing masks, for instance. People sometimes, the compliance of people determined by many things, including by a political system. In the country where democracy is prevail, is present over there. Sometimes people, in democratic society, they've got the freedom to reject. You've got demonstration in UK anti-mask. Then also in riots in 3 days in Holland, first time ever since 1945 because of the closing down curfew in the night. So compliance also can be in some major democracy, New Zealand, for instance, or maybe in Singapore, level of compliance of people to the law, to the policy of government is high, but also can be by force. Well, China, no surprise for me. It's a big country, huge populations, but they've got it's not democratic society, democratic country. They've got one party systems, oligarchy, so they can apply by force, and they've got one policy. Unlike Indonesia, very open democracy, freedom, speak, congregation, demonstration, and decentralization, where local government have got autonomy. They are autonomous. Financial capability also another impediment. Why? The more money you have, of course, you can subsidize people, you can improve the health capacity. But if you have the financial reserve, financial capability is limited, then it is also it hinders all efforts to combat and to deal with the problem of COVID. Health infrastructure varies among regions. Yes, indeed, in Jakarta is good. But you see that Indonesia only in Jakarta, big cities, Surabaya. You've got some remote islands where infrastructure facilities, health facilities is very limited as well. Again, I would like to highlight our geography, just very quick, just show the next slide very quickly. Yeah, 3 time zone next. Yeah, so Java is the majority, 150 million people, and this is the epicenter. Then next, compliance of people. Yes, next, demonstration. Sometimes we are very open democracy. Next. So what is the way forward? The way forward for us, number one, we still apply very basic principle already applied around the world as well, to apply wearing mask, apply physical distancing, then washing hands properly. We do the campaign, but also soft hard measures such as the fining, ticketing people not wearing mask, gathering, avoid public gathering, and also reducing mobility of people with the police checkposts and so on. Number two is that applying also treaty, more testing. So we have got 637 PCR labs today. Since at the onset we have got only 3, now 637. So all provinces, most of towns and cities already, having this kind of testing capability, PCR, as the gold standard. Apart from that, we have got a screening rapid test antigen being applied for such as for transportations, in public facility, and also we have got a new invention by our university, Gajah Mada University, Yogyakarta, Genos machine to detect based on the blow of your breath. Yeah, then it can detect whether this person is positive or not. Yeah, it is a screening. Once already, suspected positive, then they will send to the lab to be checked as well. Improve restriction, social distancing and mobility. So every 2 weeks, I have to produce as Minister of Home Affairs. I sign and announce what we call is restriction of large-scale public gatherings, and also micro lockdown. Micro lockdown means that Indonesia is divided into province divided into cities and regencies, divided into villages or kampung, then villages and kampung or desa divided into neighborhood. So we have got even task force to the neighborhoods, consisting around 70 to 100 households, to identify what the problems, whether it is red zone or not. If it's red zone, then we lock down this kampung. Vaccination, we have already secured, or at least we have made a deal already, 426 million, because vaccination is not only to protect individual, but we want to create herd immunity. Minimum 2/3 of population must be vaccinated and produce antibody. So out of 270 million people of Indonesian, right, 2/3 means around 180 million must be vaccinated. Then if every individual needs 2 jabs, we have to provide 360 million dosage of vaccines. So far, we have already made a commitment and deal to secure 426 million. So we mobilize all health infrastructure, medical people, supporting women owned, and also not only government, but also we invite private sectors, to speed up vaccinations. So basically, our main strategy, unlike in Singapore, that is very successful, in making the almost zero every day, got report local transmissions. Our goals is that to flatten the curve, then bend the curve to decrease. Maybe we predict after July, after fast and massive vaccination, reduce fatality rate, of course, with a good treatment, better treatment, increase recovery rate. Once we can detect earlier, the better, because we can treat them and we can, contain the spread of replications inside the body. And again, fast massive vaccinations.
That time is running.
Well, yeah. My last point is that in terms of vaccination, please show the slide number 44. Just give me just 2 minutes. Yeah, we already secured the 426 million dosage vaccines from Sinovac, Novavax, Covax, AstraZeneca, Pfizer, and we have got also our research by our pharmaceutical and biomolecular people to produce our own vaccine, namely merah putih or red and white vaccines. So supposed to be completed phase 3 late 2021. But for 126, you know the schedule over there. So number one priority is that medical workers. Now already completed 1.4 million medical workers. Public, now we are going to go to the public people, public servant, interact with the people. They are vulnerable as well. Elderly. Then the next step is that other vulnerable groups. Then the next one is other people in the communities. So you see that the timeline of our vaccinations. So we mobilize again government infrastructure, health infrastructure, also supported by the military and the police, and so we are inviting also private sectors, you know, to vaccinate their business people, so that it can speed up and can support the government. So again, our main strategy I would like to highlight is that, again, not to make zero transmission locally, because it is almost impossible, given the fact that the size, the difficulty of geography of Indonesia. So our target is that to flatten the curve and bend the curve to decrease. So we are expecting July, after fast massive vaccinations being speed up, we need 1 million. We need 1 million vaccination injection per day to complete within 1 year. Reduce fatality rate, another target, of course, with the availability of our health infrastructure, good treatment, including the convalescent plasma, then increase recovery rate. The earlier is the better. The better treatment as well can be given once we can understand that these people is, positive, tracing. Then those contact got positive as well. We do quarantine for them, and also quarantine for foreigners into Indonesia. And again, we speed up fast massive vaccination. Well, we are hoping that with this kind of measures, in July we can bend the curve, right? Then we can make our economy again recover step by step, and hopefully when already completed vaccination at the end of this year, we can build herd immunity. Then it's good news for Indonesia, and also another good news for our region, including Singapore, and of course good news also for other countries. But just remember that we have got around 216 countries, only 42 countries today that is they are able to secure the vaccines from vaccine companies. So what happened with 170? If 170 got problem in having vaccination, well, in terms of the global context, pandemic is not going to be over, because some other countries still affected. That's why they've got a collaboration, Global Alliance of Vaccination, what we call is Gavi, under WHO. Thanks very much indeed.
Thank you, Bapak, for such a very insightful presentation. Before we go on into the question and answer session, I'd like to welcome the Honorable Mr. Edwin Tong, who has joined us right now, the Minister for Culture, Community and Youth, and Second Minister for Law. Welcome, sir. Okay, so as we start now, we go for the question and answer session. Because we are running out of time, I will limit to just one question for now. I think we have from our list of participants who would want to directly speak and ask the question to our speaker. So to the person, Irene, I'm so sorry. Please, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Abang Mbak, and good afternoon, sir. So as stated, like in other social aspects, we all know that this pandemic is exactly leading us to educational deprivations as well, such as ineffective learning process. But we've come to a sense that it is not easy for men to physically encounter each other. However, we're actually are forced to rock the boat for this time being by just using conventional learning process where gathering is inevitable. Though I believe that the government are doing what's best to tackle the problems. But my question would be, how exactly do we cover these problems since the pandemic will linger for we don't know how long, and letting this kid back to the society is risky enough. So that's my question. Thank you so much in advance.
Thank you. And I perhaps would just give the floor directly to Bapak Tito to answer the question, if you may.
Yeah, you know that it's not easy again to control society. Again, as I mentioned before, that it is multi-dimension crisis. Multi-dimension crisis for public policymakers like us, like leader of state or leader of local government. They they are insisted and they are pushed to understand all dimensions of the crisis. They need to understand not only one discipline such as politics, right? They need to understand also sociology, how to control the society. They need also to understand the health problem. What is actually the virus? How to kill the virus? How to deal with the virus? How it is replicating? How it is, properly treated, and so on. So they need focusing on health issue like our epidemiology. Our epidemiology is better for them to sit together with economic people or finance people so that they got one agreement, because we cannot sacrifice one thing for another thing. So in terms of social control, we need 75 million people. We need number one, mobilize the government infrastructure, bureaucrats from president on the top level, all neighborhood, right? That's number one. So that's why every week we have got the evolutions by Zoom, led by sometimes by president, sometimes by coordinating minister, sometimes by co-ministers between myself, Minister of Health, and head of task force of COVID-19, General Doni Monardo. Yeah. Every week, red zone, orange zone, we focus on that one. So number one. Number two, Indonesia also have got a specific culture, right? Tradition, whereby, local leaders also very, very influential people, such as the religious leaders, traditional leaders, customary leaders, even mothers, right? mass organizations like Nahdlatul Ulama, religious organizations. There are many others, including media. So we involve media. Then we ask also non-government organizations, non-government establishment to help us to to make a campaign about prevention, how to deal with individually, how to help others, and so on. This is a matter of social control. So we ban social gatherings, for instance. We need also to do the soft measures. Soft measure by, again, mobilizing government and non-government infrastructure to build awareness of people. But soft measure is not sufficient. We need to enforce the law. So that's why I push all local government must produce local regulation based on national regulations. Perda, local government regulation. So specifically for COVID-19 management with sanctions, whether it's a fine, or maybe social work, or some other things, but not necessarily some other areas. I know that they also threaten the, for detaining for specific days, such as in West Sumatra. But we are not really encouraging this one. We are all suffering, right? So non-government establishment that can affect and influence people, we need to mobilize and we work together in order, to restrict large-scale activities, and also to reduce mobility until the vaccinations always, we say that 50% already vaccinated and produce antibody, then we can live. Our vaccination also based on priority. 2 priority. Number 1 is zone, red zone and orange zone priority. And number 2, vulnerable people. So we suppose that by vaccinating this priority, the curve can be bent, then we can give way, we can release step by step, like the one in Singapore also, phase 1, phase 2, phase 3, for restriction. Thank you.
Thank you, Pat, for thank you for the answer, extensive answer. Because we are running out of time, I think we could proceed to the final remarks from Batita before we go on to the upcoming discussion, if that's okay.
Yeah. Shana, if I may, to make up my final remark, yes. Because again, the second interest for me of this program is that because it is you are low community, low community, but talking about multi-dimension crisis, health, economy, finance, and so on. They need legal platform to apply the public policy. The challenge of Indonesia, which is quite difficult, is that because we applied very open democratic system, then decentralization. In pandemic situations, we need one policy, one national policy. So local government, since they are autonomous, they can produce their own local regulations. That should be in line with the national legal system in terms of COVID. And number 2, even though we are giving freedom to people of expression, speak, or congregations, but we need to make a balance between, freedom, human rights on one side, but on the other side, national security. It is always national security and civil liberty, zero-sum point. if you increase national security, then you need to sacrifice civil liberty. But if you give more civil liberty, it can sacrifice national security. In these situations, law people must consider to make an equilibrium. What is the point of equilibrium between we can keep our, we can give the freedom, civil liberty is still remaining, being, respected, but at the same time, our national security, due to the pandemic COVID-19, still survive. This is the challenge for law people. Thank you.
Thank you so much for such an insightful and extensive presentation. I think from this discussion, we basically know that there's so many challenges, so many levels of opportunities and challenges really for us to address. And as you rightly mentioned in the beginning, Indonesia is such a big country, and so many impediments which needs to be worked on collectively with so many stakeholders as well. And I think also within the ASEAN region, cooperation is really much needed between amongst state members as well. So we're running out of time, and I think before we proceed to the next session, we would like to have one picture session first with everyone here, because I believe all the speakers are here as well, so it might be good to have the picture session right now. It's okay with you, and Mr. Edwin, is that? Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay. I'm just gonna ask my colleagues from ALSA to move this forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Shanna.
Okay. Thank you, Ms. Dana. Before we end the session with Prof. Tito, I kindly ask for the participants to turn on your camera, and let's have a photo session that will be directed by Nico. Nico, are you here?
Yeah. Okay, thank you, Nislev. There are 6 slides, so please wait a moment. Okay, 3, 2, 1. Okay, next slide. 3, 2, 1. Okay. Nislev.
Okay, thank you so much, Nico, and I give it back to Ms. Shana. Thank you, Ms. Shana.
Thank you, Anissa. Before we go to the next session, just want to also thank Pak Tito for being here amid your busy schedule. And I just want to inquire whether you'll be here for the next session, Pak. If not, I think Mr. Edwin is also here to take the next discussion.
Yeah, thanks very much indeed. Yeah, Minister Tong, hi. Yeah, please convey my best regard to Minister Shanmugam as well, my colleagues. Thank you.
Thank you, Pak. If I may, Pak, I will continue to the next session. And yes, thank you very much for your time and all your efforts in actually moving forward and addressing the challenges in the pandemic in Indonesia, Pak. Okay, I will now go to the next speaker, our distinguished speaker, and with the presentation from the situation in Singapore. So we are now joined by Mr. Edwin Tong, again, as the Minister for Culture, Community and Youth, and Second Minister for Law of the Republic of Singapore. Again, Mr. Edwin Tong, welcome to the legal discussion. It is very nice to have you here to give your insights. Since we're a bit running out of time, I think I may give the floor to you right now. Thank you.
Okay, Shana, thank you very much. Good afternoon to all of you. Just want to say that Minister Shanmugam, my colleague, sends his apologies, is not able to make it, and I am here to share with you what he would have discussed in this forum. First of all, I must say that this is a very useful forum for all of us. All of us have different experiences because we I guess our own country's context is different. But that said, I think it's useful to learn from each other, to understand the different situations, and of course, to exchange best practices. Let me now give you a bit of a background before I go into what we've done in Singapore. All of us know that COVID-19 has been a real, it's been described as the worst crisis since World War II. And there's a significant human cost to it. I think more than 2.5 million deaths worldwide. We have seen in excess of 100 million infections around the world, and the numbers are still rising. It, of course, also beyond just being a health issue, it's also been a serious economic cost to everyone. Jobs, economies, people's lives have been ruined. Many businesses have been shattered. And of course, investments have been lost. And indeed, there are very few places in the world which has not experienced either the health or the economic impact, or in many cases, both. The Singapore government had to put in place some very tough measures. We are, of course, guided by scientific evidence. We observed what was done well also in other countries. We adopted relevant practices and also contextualized it to our own local situation. What we did was in several layers, and I'll just quickly take you through what we have done in an overview fashion. We have, since the experience in SARS, learned a lot from it. And I think many of our neighbors in ASEAN have done the same thing. In SARS, which we experienced in 2003, we realized that what we do need is to have a purpose-built national center for infectious diseases, not just as a center, but also a place for research, for learning, to gather all of the information and the thought leadership in one place. We had to improve the infrastructure for disease management, because when it outbreaks, there's infection control issues. What do we do with isolation facilities? How do we build more isolation facilities? How do we ensure that there were enough community care facilities, even for persons with milder symptoms and perhaps lower risk factors? And this background was something that in the end proved useful as we grapple with how to manage the COVID-19 pandemic and the spread last year. And it strengthened the Ministry of Health's crisis response capabilities. And we also were able to build up and quickly ramp up contact tracing teams. We set up a whole of ministry task force in January 2020 to deal with a whole of government response to COVID-19. We knew that this is not something that we could deal with piecemeal, and that this was an issue that was of national proportions. So we had a multi-ministry task force that came in and looked at different angles, whether it's health or economy or social. And indeed, it impacted things like our food supply, food security. It also impacted education when schools were closed. We were very focused on looking at public health surveillance. We were looking at real-time monitoring. We had a horizon scanning of existing and emerging global public health threats and so on. And basically, it allowed us to also take control of situations in the border. We were mindful of that, and like any other country, we looked at how we would have to curtail entry and also exit in some cases at the border. It's not something that's easy for Singapore to do, mainly because we are such a small country, we're an open economy, and despite that, we had to look at tough measures like shutting down our own air hub, which we eventually did. So we adopted a risk management approach, how much risk there was versus what's the upside and downside of a particular measure. We began with restrictions for travelers from China, because that was with the early learning, that's where it started. But we also progressively extended the restrictions as the outbreak spread. We introduced a few measures, one of which was the stay home notice. So you isolate for 14 days, then you undergo a swab test at the end of the 14 days to work out whether or not you would be back in normal circulation. We also established special travel arrangements with certain countries in an attempt to try to preserve essential business and also official travel. The next thing we did was to look at a population-wide testing. We've enhanced our national testing strategy over the past couple of months. So for example, we have groups within Singapore who will be constantly exposed to different people as part of the job. So we're talking about people who work in hawker centers, selling food every day to different groups, constantly having different stream of people. Public transport operators like bus drivers, taxi drivers. So they were offered regular tests so that There are constant contact and exposure to different parts of the population would not prove to be a significant risk. In addition, anyone who saw a doctor with acute respiratory symptoms or what we call ARS or flu-like symptoms, we are advised to take a test as quickly as possible. We also had other higher risk staff like ASEAN hotel operators. The staff were there looking after the ASEAN facilities, the airport and the marine workers. And so for those, we had a rostered testing for each of them so that they were tested regularly. And by doing that, layering on the different tests at different times allowed us to have a sense of where the infections were in the community and allowed us to ring-fence transmissions once we were able to detect them. One of the other measures we implemented was, of course, safe management measures. At the time it was implemented, I was at the time in the Ministry of Health. And one of the tasks I had to do was to look at how we come up with rules on how people were able to go out, how many people they can go out with, where they could go, whether they had to put on a mask, how many people in a group could they be in, and so on. And as I'm sure my colleagues here will agree, that's proven to be not an easy task. It sounds easy, but it's not so easy because all of these things that we do on a day-to-day basis is really part of life. It's part of what we do as social interaction. But we've had to curtail that, we've had to control. So safe management measures was a key part of our strategy to ensure that groups were kept small, that people did not inevitably end up with super spreader events, and that in the event that one or two were detected, that the contact tracing would be easy to do, and also with a smaller group. We use technology as well to devise what we call in Singapore the Trace Together. It uses Bluetooth technology to detect a proximity between people so that you can either use it on a token or you can use it on your phone, which has Bluetooth technology. And we use track and with a person who has been infected and whether you're at risk. And that allows us to also do something to track the contacts, the close contacts of those who were exposed. So this allows us to very quickly isolate. And as I'm sure, the quicker you isolate someone who's been exposed, then the extent to which this person can reinfect another person will be limited. The current strategy, of course, I wouldn't say the last, but the key part of where our country is focused now is, of course, on the vaccination program. We looked at the options very early on. We had a couple of options in terms of vaccines. We set up a committee to look at the issues around safety, around efficacy, and of course, to manage the possible side effects, and to look at comparing the different options that we had. Eventually, we accepted the expert committee's recommendations. So everyone who was medically eligible should be vaccinated. We've made it voluntary so that there is a choice. But we have been going out there explaining that vaccinations were safe. We have prioritized the healthcare workers, the frontliners, and also those who are seniors, the more vulnerable, as people who should receive the vaccinations first as a priority, but will progressively broaden the vaccinations to include other segments of society as well. We've had to, as you can imagine, this is a relatively new item. I mean, the vaccine is still new. So we had to be very proactive in reaching out to our population so that they can better understand what it stands for, what are the risk factors, what are the upsides, what we needed to have a sense of the public sentiment on the vaccines, and eventually provide assurance as to the safety and also efficacy of the vaccines. So that's in a nutshell, the medical side of handling the COVID-19 pandemic. But as I mentioned earlier, there's also a very strong economic impact that it has on our country. And much as we want to manage the health impacts and limit it, we also want to ensure that after the pandemic is over, or even as we're going through the pandemic, that people's livelihoods don't suffer because of the closures of the economy. Like many other countries, we've seen spending come down, businesses and jobs have been affected, And a lot of economic activity has had to stop, mainly because we had overnight a circuit breaker, as we call it in Singapore, to stop transmission back in April and May last year. So as a result, shops could not open, businesses had to close, and no one plans for a business to have a complete closure, no cash flow for a couple of months. But that was what we had to do to keep the country safe. So it's had a significant impact. So we had a couple of measures to try to mitigate the impact of this. First, last year, in a totally unprecedented fashion, we had 4 budgets. We had our usual budget period in February, but we followed up very quickly with several others right through to May last year. We committed almost 100 billion Singapore dollars to respond to COVID-19. That, for our country, is close to 20% of the GDP. The immediate focus was, of course, to help businesses tide over a difficult period, to retain employees. For example, we had a scheme known as the JSS, the Job Support Scheme, where employees of employers or businesses, government would supplement employee salaries up to 75%. And for a significant proportion of our employees, they would have been supported by the government for several months last year, so that the employers will not find it easy and will not take the easier option of letting go of the employees, which in turn creates unemployment and several other economic problems downstream. So that was one key plank of where we put the money into the economy last year. We also looked at self-employed. Many of our economy now are gig workers, freelancers. So self-employed was also a feature of this. We had jobs creation packages. We looked at how we can upskill. And the idea was to create more jobs in this period of time, to look at what we could do. So in the end, I think a range of job options were open. And as of last count, we had about 100,000 more jobs or skill places available as of the end of last year. So the idea was to create opportunities, just as you're also supporting them financially. The second key plank of the economic strategy was to look at the banking and finance side, working with banks to look at initially a deferment of payments, for example, where many individuals had mortgages to service, whether or not we could put in a holiday period where the principal payments were deferred, maybe only interest was being serviced at this point in time, to manage cash flow essentially for both businesses as well as individuals. The third major plank of the economic strategy was to pass a series of very urgent bills in Parliament to provide relief. So we had several bills. I'll just quickly explain to you what we did. In April, at the start of circuit breaker, we had a piece of legislation. For convenience, we call it COVID-1, very unimaginative name, where we introduced a timeout, a moratorium on payments for rent, for example, to provide temporary relief so that businesses don't immediately go into legal enforcement, to make it a little bit harder for businesses and individuals to be wound up or made bankrupt, so that there was a bit of time. The idea was to buy a period of time. And depending on the nature of the contract, the relief period lasted between 7 to 11 months to give parties breathing space, time to renegotiate contracts, for example, and to reevaluate for themselves how to continue with this business model, now knowing that for a protracted period of time, businesses may not be able to open. A few months later, we did COVID number 2. By that time, the COVID-19 situation had deteriorated significantly, not just in Singapore, but globally as well. And the economic outlook was a lot more uncertain, and I think significant risk to many of the over and drive many of the small enterprise businesses. So we decided that we had to look at in quite an unprecedented way, look at how we can co-share rental obligations between government, landlords, and also tenants. And so in the end, for a period of 4 months, we had up to 4 months of sharing. And in most cases, 2 months were contributed to by the landlord and a further 2 months by the government to help to sustain tenants in this period of time and essentially give them a bit of a rental holiday so that they can find a way to manage the cash flow and to remain in business as far as possible. In the later months of last year, we had several other programs, quickly introduce you to them. When it became clear that the operating assumptions that parties entered into were no longer viable, we introduced what we call the Realign Framework, which would apply to a party who had entered into a contract on certain assumptions before COVID had hit us. And those assumptions would now, of course, no longer be viable or tenable. So, for example, if you're running a conference center or a travel center, for example, where you price your business and you price your overheads on the basis of being able to attract a certain number of travel customers or conference from overseas attendees, all of those assumptions are now completely off the table. Not possible to travel, you can't have conferences, you can't have gatherings of large people. So the pricing assumptions of your contract for either rental or maybe for equipment would completely be shifted. So in light of that, we introduced a Realign Framework to allow these smaller businesses to renegotiate contracts with their counterparties, to open up a discussion on what it would look like. Maybe we can reduce the rent for X period of months, and then we can catch up on the rental subsequently, or we can look at renegotiating the pricing altogether. And if that is not possible, then to have a prospective termination of the contract. So all the accrued obligations would still be, parties would still be liable for it, but for the future obligations, they'll be released because the assumptions are no longer viable. So we had that framework. It's still ongoing now, and it is still something that we look at closely because parties remain in discussion. And where there are differences and disagreements, we have a tribunal made up of assessors, not in a judicial capacity, more administratively, to look at the nature of the dispute and to try and do justice to the situation, to look at how the parties can be made to part ways, but equitably. Looking ahead, we've just discussed our latest budget in Parliament for 2021, and we're in fact in the middle of a budget debate now. It's clear now that we need to still continue to support the economy, but also in a targeted way, not just to give financial support to everyone in the same way, and that might create the unintended consequence of keeping alive some corporates which actually were fundamentally not viable in the first place. So the new packages that have been announced in Parliament by our finance minister is a lot more targeted, and it's also focused on recovery, focusing on also allowing individuals and businesses to pivot to what we would regard as a new normal, at least for the immediate short to medium term. We will continue to invest strategically for growth and, of course, press on with economic transformation, which has been a mainstay of all of our previous budgets. And that has also been a feature in this year's budget. Finally, let me just speak a little bit about how we have, in the Ministry of Law and also in the way we have organized these relief packages, what are our considerations? Singapore is very much a common law country. We look at how we structure contracts, and essentially parties have absolute freedom subject to certain rules to enter into contracts. These are all private arrangements, there's complete freedom. But we had to make some very hard choices over the last year or so, because there was a need to balance public health with societal needs and, of course, livelihoods. You take, for example, the measures we put in place just on the health front to limit and curtail freedom to move around as you like, how many people you can gather with, which businesses can open, and so on. So very hard decisions have been made to intervene in business, to intervene in the way people conduct their lives. And when we considered our COVID temporary relief measures, we had this in mind. We knew that we had to intervene in what would otherwise have been two parties' private contracts, privately negotiated and agreed contracts. But we had to intervene to unravel a little bit of that, to give the parties a bit of a nudge to allow parties to reevaluate their financial and, of course, contractual position. Like I mentioned earlier, many of these contracts were entered into at a time when the world was a very different place, when assumptions were very different. And the supervening event that was COVID is completely unprecedented, not known before, and its impacts devastating and also far-reaching in a way which really could not have been foreseen prior to this event. So we introduced these legislative bills in Parliament to ensure that we comply with a proper parliamentary process. People get a chance to debate it, understand it, scrutinize it. It was done urgently, but presented to Parliament nonetheless, so that it's very clear that we're doing this in a very targeted fashion to provide relief only because there was what's necessary to maintain a balance in our economy, to ensure that there's fairness, and ultimately to ensure that this situation, which has caused economic damage, does not damage businesses and individuals as far as possible for the longer term. And so that's why I mentioned earlier, it's not as easy over the last period of time, last few months, to put a company into insolvency or to put someone into bankruptcy, simply because we have extended the timelines and also increased the thresholds. And the purpose of that was to ensure that once we begin to recover from this pandemic, when the economy begins to come back again, that there is no longer lasting damage than is necessary to individuals and to businesses as far as possible, mainly to secure the balance and ensure that there is a sharing of the pain around our society. So I'll stop there. I hope that has given you a fair sense of what our priorities have been on the pandemic front in the last year or so. Just want to say that all our countries have a different way of approaching it, but I think fundamentally at the heart of our measures, 2 or 3 things will come through. One, of course, safety, lives, preserving lives as far as the pandemic and its impacts on health is concerned. And second, ensuring through a series of measures, whether it's fiscal or supportive or economic, to ensure that livelihoods remain protected. And third, I think there is a societal element to it, beyond just finance and economic stimulus packages and so on. There is, of course, a social element to what we have done, and there's a social cost to these safe management measures because people can't come together, people can't go to religious organizations, can't go to church or to the mosque or to temples in the same way as they do. So there is that aspect of society that I think we have to look out for as well. And to the extent possible, that figures quite high on our agenda on how we can bring people back in a safe, limited way, so that they can continue to worship, they can still see people socially. And that aspect of society is not to be underestimated, because that's what keeps a country and its community together. So those are the 3 or 4 priorities that we've had. Maybe I'll hand the time back now to Shana and see whether there are any questions on what I've said. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Tong, for that elaborate presentation and getting to know a little bit more of the Singaporean context. So we do indeed have questions. We have 2 participants who would like to ask directly to you. I would ask first Alda to present your question, and then Ale. So Alda, the floor is yours.
Thank you for the opportunity. Honorable Minister, I would like to ask a question. Based on your elaboration, Singapore have done many fundamental strategies in facing COVID-19 in many sectors, which is very astonishing, ranging from economy, law, until public sector. But I'm very curious, as mentioned before, one of the crucial keys to Singapore's success in tackling this pandemic is by building the people's sense of crisis and awareness in facing COVID-19. I'm very curious, is there any specific way done by Singapore to ensure holistic community compliance in doing safety measures, hence enhancing the awareness of Singapore citizens to actually conform, as this is a huge challenge for many other countries? Thank you very much.
Elda, thank you very much for the question. I think it's a very important question, and I think I will probably speak on behalf of many other governments in the world when we say that policies alone don't mean very much if people don't understand them or people don't comply with them as a country. And the pandemic has actually demonstrated that we are really only as strong as the weakest link amongst us in the community, because the pandemic is such that if one or two in the community is not careful, reckless, the transmission is going to be accelerated in that quarter. And soon, it spreads very quickly. We've been lucky in a couple of ways because we've had occasion in the past during peace times, and I use the word peacetime loosely, to have built up a degree of goodwill and trust between government and people. Respect also in the context of authority. What we've had to deal with in the pandemic is something that's novel. I mentioned earlier that we had to go with science and scientific basis and evidence. Whether you wear a mask, when you wear a mask, whether this is spread by droplets, is it by aerosols? So there was a whole series of factors that went behind it, and we had to be very open with our people. So I mentioned earlier that we set up a task force. The two co-chair of the task force, two of my cabinet colleagues, they were very proactive in being very front-facing with our people. From a very early stage, we had practically every 2 or 3 days, there was a press conference to explain, to look at new risk factors, to explain what we know, to understand the spread of cases in the community in certain ways, to give as much information as possible, to let people, to sensitize people to the challenges that we face as well. And there were occasions where we didn't have all the answers. And we felt that being open and tell people that we don't have all the answers here, but this is our best estimate or best sense based on the data as to where it's going to be, was, I think, something that engendered trust. And so it was this partnership that we felt was useful. And I think when you mentioned the word holistic community compliance, it's not something that, we also take for granted. And I think we're very fortunate to have a people that's cooperative. That said, there's always going to be people who don't comply. There'll be those who are a bit more reckless. And I think it's also got to do with following up. And so we have a team, a crew of people which we recruited. Many of those who used to be airline stewardesses, for example, they're not able to travel for a period of time. We recruited them and they became our safety distance ambassadors. So they moved around in the community. They gave advice to people not to be too proximate, too close to each other, to wear their masks. And we had a fair amount of cooperation with our safety distance advisors. So overall, that was how we achieved it. It's still work in progress, but I think we've come quite far.
Thank you.
Thank you, Alda and Mr. Edwin. I will proceed to the second participant. Ale, you have the floor.
Okay, thank you for this opportunity. The Minister from Singapore, I would like to question about how the Singapore government makes sure or guarantee that all the necessary of the society are fulfilled during this lockdown or in the Singapore. And then the second one is, what is the level of public confidence in Singapore about the vaccination? For me, that's it, and thank you for this opportunity.
Thank you, Ale. Again, good questions. I think we're all very concerned to ensure that our key pillars of our society does not get permanently damaged in the longer term. I think most countries focus on livelihoods. And when I rounded up my speech, I said earlier, there's actually a third aspect, which is how do we ensure that the glue that binds people together, whether it is social interaction or religious interaction, we try as far as possible to maintain that. So even as we maintain safe distancing measures, we have been very conscious to allow in a limited way people to go back to church, to mosques, to temples. We've also opened up some of our arts and culture facilities, again in a small way, but still there's an artistic cultural offering. People can go, it's not so many people in the same auditorium, but to allow these softer aspects of society to still function. And I think that has been helpful to keep the societies intact. You mentioned the word society's fulfillment. I think that's very true. That's what we need to work towards. In terms of confidence in the vaccine, I think we have got a reasonable level of confidence. We have started the program at the end of last year, so it's been just under 2 months. We've achieved almost 300,000 vaccinations to date. And I think the rollout is now going into the community in a significant way. I think the numbers will start to spike up over the next couple of weeks as we reach out. And as I mentioned just now, after having done the healthcare workers, the frontliners, the transport workers, and so on, we are now doing those at 70 and above. Soon, we'll move to those who are 60 and above. And then by April, the rest of the population. So my own sense is that there is a fair degree of acceptance to it. Some people have concerns, obviously. And of course, some have their own particular health concerns. If you have existing allergies, there are going to be issues as to whether you can take the vaccine. So we do have to explain, and I think we take the same approach as we did before, which is go out there, be quite frank about what we know, what we don't know, and say this is the best medical advice we've seen. But at the same time, also explain to the population that you can't take for granted that the COVID-19 pandemic is the disease is something that we can overcome easily, because seniors especially are particularly vulnerable. So we put the information out there. I think it's reasonably well taken, and the confidence levels are high.
Thank you, Ale, for the question. And again, once again, for answering the question, Mr. Edwin. I think I don't see any other further questions here. So perhaps if I may ask Mr. Edwin to kind of give us a final remarks on this for the session. Please, the floor is yours.
Yes, thank you, Shana. First of all, thank you for inviting us to this session. I think the questions that you've asked and what I heard earlier on when Pak Tito was speaking, I think illustrate that none of us have all the answers to how we deal with this. And personally, I feel that the more we are able to exchange ideas, the more we listen to context to how you deal with a certain problem. It may not be the same, but we can always contextualize a good idea to our own society, our own economy. And I think having these conversations are useful. And I encourage all of you to have more of these discussions. And I feel that when we do that, we not just come together a bit more and have an understanding, but we learn a lot as well. And as we take back ideas to our own context, I think we can always work through, and there is really no monopoly over good ideas. And each of you have contributed that in different ways. And I encourage you to continue to do the same and keep up this conversation. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Minister Edwin Tong, for such a very insightful presentation. And also again, to the Minister of Home Affairs from Indonesia to also be presenting their responses and also their insights as well. So before I close the session, I think just a final remark from our end. What we've seen from this discussion really is that this is a very unprecedented. It's an unprecedented time. It is a very unprecedented challenge for all countries, and in responding to such unprecedented challenge, it is very important to kind of contextualize to the local and national with the national context. We've seen from our discussions here with the Singaporean government and Indonesian government the different challenges and also the opportunities that arise from in handling the situation and in handling the impact of the COVID-19 as well. The utilizing of evidence-based research, utilizing technology, and also actually having the state to kind of intervene not only in the public measures but also within the private sector as well is also key, and to ensure that the impact of the COVID-19 does not always go further down, but somehow it could actually go up and be enhanced again. And I think it's also very important in the last when Mr. Edwin was saying that it's not only that we need to balance out the economic and also the public measures, but also looking at the societal aspect, and where sometimes it is something that we lack we overlook. And hopefully by having to understand these from the discussions, we also pay attention more on looking at that aspect as well. I think one of the last main points that is also stressed by Mr. Edwin is cooperation and collaboration. I think, as you know, in the ASEAN region, cooperation, collaboration is very much an important principle. And hopefully, by collaborating and cooperating, we could all fight this pandemic together and hopefully recover and, growing stronger than before. So with that, I would want to close this legal discussion. Again, I would like to express my greatest gratitude for Pak Tito and also Mr. Edwin Tong here for giving their time to be able to discuss with us law students. And hopefully everyone here are able to give some insights and utilize this for their further discussions with fellow law students, not only within the countries, but also because we have here ALSA Singapore and ALSA Indonesia. So it's important you guys, if you could kind of discuss this, even take this forward and have another separate discussion and to ensure that we would be able to progress and to become better. So thank you so much, everyone, for tuning into these legal discussion. And now I'll be handing it back to the organizers for the final ceremony. Thank you.
Thank you, Shana.
Thank you, Mr. Edwin.
Okay, thank you so much, Ms. Shana and Mr. Edwin. Thank you, Ms. Shana, for directing a very fruitful discussion. Now we are going to give a certificate of appreciation to our speaker, Mr. Edwin Tong, that will be awarded by Khalifa Al-Qais Yusuf as the President of ALSA National Chapter Indonesia. Al-Qais, you may have the time.
All right, thank you, Ms. Liv. Mr. Edwin, thank you very much. Thank you very much for your time and presentation. It is very insightful, and despite your busy schedule, you still managed to attend and provide us with your insightful presentation. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay. And next, we are going to give a certificate of appreciation to our moderator, Ms. Shana, that will be awarded by Sukma.
Okay, Ms. Shana, we also in Indonesia want to thank Mbak Shana for her time, for being our moderator for today. We truly appreciate it, and stay safe and stay healthy, Mbak, in Bangkok. Once again, thank you.
Thank you so much, Sukma.
Okay, thank you so much, Mbak Shana and Sukma. Once again, I would like to say thank you to Mbak Shana and to Mr. Edwin Tong for attending to this legal discussion. We hope that Indonesia, Singapore, as well as the other countries will be able to tackle the issue and will be able to make strategies so that the condition in the government, the economy, and other sectors will be back to normal or even better. And now we have come to the end of the 6th ALSA Indonesia legal discussion that is in collaboration with ALSA and Singapore. We do hope that this legal discussion will be educational for all of the audiences, especially related with the COVID-19 situation in Indonesia and in Singapore. Let's keep on praying that the situation among us will get better soon, and don't forget to also support our government in tackling the issues related to COVID-19. Once again, thank you so much to all of the participants who have supported this legal discussion. On behalf of ALSA Indonesia, I would like to say thank you and goodbye. See you everyone in the upcoming ALSA event.